I'm going to spotlight and to show Viola here. So Viola is essentially the co-founder and CEO of Ovamba. Ovamba is a business that helps African entrepreneurs and small business and micro business access finance, access funds, right? So they provide short-term loans, short-term fundings via mobile phone technology. She's based out of Maryland, USA, and she's originally from Cameroon. And Viola, please keep me honest here if I said something wrong. I'll give you maybe a minute or two to add to it before we dive into the meat of our workshop.
Is it my turn?
Yes, just to introduce yourself. Maybe I lied or something, so just keep me honest.
It's okay, Aris. You know I pay you to lie for me, right? I pay him nothing and he's not a liar. In fact, he's very generous. Aris, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in what I think is an incredibly important forum, a place where we can all get together and have conversations about what's really real, what's true, what's hearsay, and to have individuals like myself who've been through that journey dispel some of the misunderstandings and misconceptions around being an African that runs a business, that's a startup that may or may not be set for the African continent, but you're where you are trying to get your ideas together. So my name is Viola Llewellyn. I am the co-founder and president of Ovamba Solutions, Inc. And as Aris explained, this is a business that evolved from an idea around how diasporans use remittances to support their African communities and families. And it has been a very long journey since its inception in 2013 to where we are today in 2020 as a leading trade tech company that is focused on innovating solutions that will help banks to do a much better job of extending financial inclusion and driving African business growth through trade and importation. Ovamba's technology is completely designed, coded, and is owned in every sense of the word, which makes me so proud, by one transplant Jamaican who grew up in Detroit. His name is Marvin Carl, my business partner, who currently lives in Douala, Cameroon. No, he does not speak much French. And myself, the Cameroonian parents born in London, have lived in the United States since 1992, when I came here on vacation and decided I'll just stay. When we started the company in 2013, we were incredibly clueless, had absolutely no idea. All we knew was that the Jobs Act that President Obama had signed into action was the precursor for peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding. And it occurred to us that Africans do this all the time, gathering in groups, sharing money, sharing their social credit in order to assist each other with their business endeavors. And before 2013, I had been in a day job. I was incredibly favored, I would say. I worked for a very wealthy individual who was a bit of a playboy, to be perfectly honest, who gave me his platinum credit card and said, help me start an investment fund. I'm off to Saint-Tropez with a bunch of blondies. When I get back, please have an investment fund ready for me. Now, it's important for you to note, just about every last one of you on this call is way smarter and more educated than me. I am the 19-year-old whose mother found her pregnant and I never went to university. We all know how African parents hate their daughters being pregnant before being married and having no education. This is uncool, but it's not the end of the world. Here I am today. So anyway, fast forward. I have worked for IBM, Digital Equipment Corporation, Wang Computers, Rothschild, KPMG, and a bunch of other companies for whom you would definitely need to have more than a master's to get the job. How on earth did I get these jobs?
Thank you.
Lots of talking, lots of stealing mentorship, which is what I encourage all of you to do after this. Lots of finding out who's the wealthiest white man in the room and go stand right next to him and siphon as much information, emulate his behavior, and then go do it for yourself somewhere else. It's the cheapest MBA in history. And I'm going to share all that I know today with you. So when my business partner came to me and said, Africa's going to be big, I told him he's an idiot. No, it won't. The fact that you guys are on this call and Aris has brought you together means that you are smarter than I was back then, and you realize that the African continent will literally save the planet tomorrow. It will be the place where people like you will create business ideas that will solve problems in your communities, in your cities. And if we're really good at working together, these ideas will gather the momentum that will actually save the world in the end. Take a look at what's going on right now and the fact that innovation in Africa is not a joke. It's a big deal. I went back to Cameroon to see my family because I never ever would go there. I would just fly them to me, and I saw things that were a little disturbing.
No, just let me jump in quick because you're saying way too much way too early. Thanks for that, Viola. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to run a quick survey. No, that's cool. I just want to run a quick survey real quick so we have a good understanding of the crowd we have before us today. So let me turn it on. You guys take you know, probably 30 to 45 seconds to fill out this service real quick, and that will help educate all of us, especially Viola, to figure out what level of expertise, because everybody is dumb as me. You know, she probably needs dumbing out a lot. So let's see how you know, where you guys coming from, and more importantly, where you are in your journey. As soon as that's done, I'll share the results, and then we'll move on to getting to know Viola's story a little bit better. Give it another 10-15 seconds.
Is everybody voting?
Yes, they are. I'm at 60% now. 30 out. We have 50 folks on. 31. Can somebody get me to? Can you guys get me to 40? 40 at 50 at least, so I can wrap it up. It's 34. I need 6 more, please. 6 more folks to vote. I see a lot of folks. I hope they're not playing games or falling asleep, because I would kick them out right away. All right, that's fine. Let's just end the poll and share the results. Hopefully you can see it. Viola, we have 20% of the participant with an idea but not validated. 29% that lack a strong team or connection to essentially pursue their journey. So the question, to be specific, I got to be distracted. The question, to be specific, is which one of the following areas will cause your business to fail? Sorry. Remember we discussed that, Viola. So majority of folks are saying, I will fail in my African business journey because I don't have a team or the connections. 20% are saying my idea is not validated. 26% talk about lack of capital, I don't have money, and so forth. 71% of folks on this workshop do want to build a business in Africa, and 29% abroad, as in the diaspora. I hope that it helps educate us in terms of who we have and where we come, what they.
Very good lay of the land. I have a good sense. How many people do we have on here?
We do have at this moment 52 folks.
Okay, that's a really good cozy group there.
We have 111, so we probably going to have folks joining quietly.
Gotcha.
Cool. So my question to you, so as I mentioned earlier, we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about getting to know your story a little bit. So let's start off with, how did you come up with this opportunity with Avamba? I understand it was an iterative process, but help us understand your process, because we are here in the diaspora. We want to do something, and we're looking at somebody like you who has crossed that bridge as a mentor, as an inspiration. Remember, if I go thumbs up, then sharing too much knowledge. So the question is, how did you come across this opportunity in terms of research, market fit, and so forth?
Well, as I was sharing excessively, my business partner is the person that mentioned to me that Africa was going to be big. And this is an issue that we all, well, not all of us, but is symptomatic of us as a culture. We have a tendency to wait for outsiders to tell us that we're worthy of something or that we've got something great. And it has cost the African continent and our culture a lot. So I was symptomatic of that. As far as I was concerned, I had my great job. I was doing brilliantly, making a fair amount of money. Now, I had already left my job because I got cheesed off one Tuesday, and went off and started my own consultancy. So when Marvin said this and I disagreed with him, I did take a trip to Cameroon to go take a look. And when I came back, I was utterly convinced. So the markers for this change and this transition was the conviction that there was a need, the conviction that there was an opportunity, and the wonderfully functional ignorance that I had, thinking that, sure, I can go do this. It shouldn't be too difficult. After all, I have helped other people build their businesses in this part of the world. I'll just take what I know and transfer it in that direction. And no doubt, Aris, we will get to the point where we discuss why that's not always an applicable idea. So that's how Ovamba came to be. I will also point out that just with, as you all have seen, individuals that use words like doing stuff in Africa, which is your biggest red flag, is another one of my sins that I was guilty of, because before Ovamba, we kept trying to find some way to do some sort of consultancy or look for an opportunity where someone's friend has a dad whose sister has another friend in a government agency that has contracts with absolutely no context. And usually the individuals who are telling you about these contacts and contracts usually work at 7-Eleven or are doing nursing somewhere. They're absolutely nowhere near the action. And there are plenty of us running around looking for African contracts in order to snatch up some crumbs. So that's one of the first warnings I would love for you guys to take away. Steer clear of that nonsense. We built Ovamba because we found a way to effect change and to serve a need and make a product to address it.
Great. I do want to dive in a little bit more. You're specifically essentially financing, not just supporting, but literally financing micro and small businesses. How did you come up with that specific idea? Because there's so many ways to help them out. You can help them find clients. You can help them better quality, better customer service, all that stuff. How did you pinpoint, or why did you pinpoint it to providing financial solutions, or literally money?
There were numerous pivots that took us to that point, Aris. And after we raised our friends and family capital and went to Cameroon, everything that we'd ever written in our business plan was absolutely wrong. But the great news about that, it forced us to be a business in Cameroon, which meant that we were experiencing the pain points of the customers that we eventually came to assist and fund. Figuring out what is the real problem here that needs to be solved was the same problem that goes on all over the world, and it's access to capital. And as we did our research and tried various iterations of trying to get money into hands of businesses and used a lean approach to analyze and try to define what the effects and what the drawbacks were of our different methods, that's when we came up with the model that we have today. Now, one small correction, Aris, we don't deal with micro, we deal with small and medium. That's because our understanding also is that there are plenty of solutions for micro. There are plenty of individuals creating fintech solutions for people that need $100 or $1,000. But there really isn't anything for the missing middle. And there are plenty of those individuals running around chasing contracts that are doing large PPPs that belong in the hands of people whose business models actually don't trickle down. So wanting to see some of the trickle down, wanting to serve the missing middle, wanting to find out how and why some businesses are successful, because we wanted to have a long-term ecosystem impact. And that's how we came up with the model that at the end of the day for Africans, it's not about getting money to them. It's really about making sure that that money has impact at velocity, is paid back, that the businesses actually grow, and that the risk models that we get from the data thrown off from these activities can be replicated so that you've got a sustainable business.
Can you give me a quick order of magnitude in terms of the range of loans, right? Are we talking $1,000 to $10,000 or 100? Just a quick one, quickly.
I love the fact that you used the wrong word there, because that's what's going to help people to understand why our business is different. Loans are for banks, and we are not a bank. It's because we didn't want to be a bank with the hefty price of a bank license and all of the controls from the COBAC and the central banks that we were forced to find an innovative solution. We fund transactions for businesses who are in trade and are importing goods or are trying to buy goods on a wholesale retail basis from international sources or domestic sources. We fund transactions that can start around 20 to 25,000 euro, all the way up to €500,000. We have customers who are on their 8th transaction at that level of investment. These transactions are 6 months long usually. They are specifically to buy the goods that the customers need, import them, clear their goods through customs, and provide logistical and warehousing solutions to make sure that the goods are in our physical and legal control. Because being a business on the ground in Cameroon told us, if you try to do any kind of unsecured lending, you're not going to get that money back. And if you think that you're going to go to court to have your contract enforced, you are dreaming. It won't happen. So how do we resolve the challenge of bringing capital into the system, helping companies to grow, so make sure that our investors are paid back and that the customer stays sticky and comes back to us? And those are the key points that we fixed and had to address using technology for our solution.
Absolutely, thanks. It's great that you are so precise. I love it. That's fantastic. My next question then, you touched quickly, you mentioned Cameroon multiple times. Are you based at, are you operating only in Cameroon or multiple countries, or what's the spectrum here?
I'm going to answer this question as a way to help the rest of the our cozy crew here to understand why Africa is such an important and accessible market for you. If you're in Cameroon, Douala, you actually are accessing 5 countries in the CIMAC region. And by picking trade as a category upon which to register the company, it means that there are wholesale and retail customers who we are indirectly funding through the value chain who are coming from as far away as Chad. So we don't have to be in every country in order to serve the Central African region. That's because OHADA, which is a legal system and a harmonized code, allows portability of business contracts, financing, and bank systems that can put you in so many countries all at once.
For our education, what is OHADA and what is, you mentioned CIMAC? Because not all of us may not be familiar with those organizations or whatever, just for education quickly.
OHADA, so that you get what the acronyms stand for. I've long since forgotten, but Africa is divided into zones. You've got the CIMAC zone, SADC, I think COMESA, and then you've got the West African states. All of these zones operate in harmonized clusters. In the same way that before Brexit, if you were in Spain, your business was easily portable with no need to change employment laws, contracts, or anything else, or currency from Spain to Italy to France, whatever the case may be. Africa is set up in a similar way. OHADA has a 17-country cluster that uses basically the same currency that is permanently pegged to the euro. So when you do business in this area, and people say to you things like, well, what about the exchange rate? Exchange rate to who? To the euro is permanently pegged. To America, yes, it is a problem. Now, if you are operating in Cameroon the way that we do, which is part of OHADA, that gives us a 17-country market. We also have offices in Ivory Coast that gives us access to the smaller subcluster of the West African states. That's great for banking, for legal, for currency, everything. So basically that gives Ovamba unfettered access for expansion into 17 countries. You, as an African, will be told by those who think they know better than you that if you're not in Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria and South Africa, you are not relevant in Africa. That's because these individuals do not understand that these clusters, including Ohio, which are mostly Francophone, are just as powerful and as effective and relevant as the places where they speak English. I'm not going to get too political with you. There are differences in how you run your business in a Francophone zone from an Anglophone zone, but I'll wait till Aris tells me it's time to talk about that.
Sure. Quickly, you explained Ohio. What about CEMAC? You touched, can you just on maybe one sentence?
CEMAC is the Central African nations of Gabon, Cameroon, Chad, I want to say Congo, and I may be missing one other, could be Equatorial.
Okay.
Central Africa.
I'm sorry?
Okay. Central Africa, I heard.
Central Africa, thank you.
Okay. Quickly, okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let's switch gears a little bit and figure out in your journey, what are the biggest mistakes you've made starting out, really? So if I were to go down your path, you know, where are the mines that you fell into that I should be avoiding? Or if you were to do it again, I mean, you get the question.
Thinking that you need to be really clever is a problem because you'll overthink things instead of responding to them and taking things as you find them. There's a tendency for us to want to project our beliefs, our ideas, and the love affair we're having with our business ideas on the environment. It is a known fact that no battle plan can actually survive contact with the enemy. The business plan that you write today, if you've not had the chance to run that through a beta test, is not what you think it is. You have to be flexible. So if you're not flexible, you're going to have a hard time. Assuming that everybody is sitting there waiting open arm for you to come along and help them is also a misnomer. Having the inability to realize that you must pivot and have the skill set to foster change very quickly and recognize what the signs are also a challenge. Language, I don't think is so much of an issue. I've had to learn how to speak Franglais, but you will find that the business culture is a huge wall to scale. What you think makes sense and people's ideas of what is a moral value, so to speak, compared to what you may be used to, can be challenging. I'll give you an example. Spoke to somebody who told me that the best money they ever earn is the one that they steal from somebody versus the money that they earn honestly. So that means that if you come into some of these business markets and you pick customers, you may think that they value what you're bringing. But if you've never asked them what's important to them, you're going to find yourself barking up the wrong tree. So it's important to ask and ask and ask a lot of questions. I would also say one of the stumbling blocks was finding oneself sequestered by one or two individuals and having your sense of reality through the lens that they provide you versus speaking to a large swath of individuals and being very willing to change your mind as things change on the ground. Aris, what else were you asking me in this area?
No, it was just that. Just a couple example, maybe. You mentioned one. Yeah, I want something practical, right? Because there's a difference between
environment, policy, banking, legal, employment, labor. Those areas, apart from what I've just spoken about, are if you do not address and understand how they work, you will easily become frustrated and you'll be gone within 2 to 3 years.
So the space.
Some examples.
Sorry?
Are you looking for examples?
Yes.
All right.
Please.
We start with a particular individual who was part of the first 20 people that we hired. Our business model at the beginning was because we thought that we would co-fund loans with microfinance institutions. So we hired people who came from a banking background. And we did not project or know when that model would come to an end and when we would have to pivot. And that pivot happened before 1 year. The contracts for employment that we had with individuals were not open-ended. And they were not like the contracts you may be used to in the United States, where you can hire people at will and just give them 2 weeks notice for no reason and away they go. We didn't understand that there's a difference between employment law and labor law. So when this individual who I fired came back from a typical 2-hour African lunch where he'd had 1 or 2 beers he was drunk. So I sent him home and I called him in and I fired him on Monday. I didn't realize that the law says because I'd had him sign a 2-year contract, he was entitled to all the money, all of his wages for the 2-year period. On top of that, he chose to collude with somebody at the Department of Labor, which is different from the Department of Employment. Department of Employment covers employment law and employment contracts, HR, wages, benefits, and compensation. Department of Labor deals with work conditions and what happens if you get fired. He went all the way to the north of Cameroon to a place called Garoua to file his lawsuit against us, which would force us to have to travel all that way from Douala up to the north as a way to keep us completely embroiled. I have never gone to that court up there. I had to find costly consultants to stand in for us. It just so happened that one of our employees, whose father passed away not that long ago, happened to be the judge on the bench. She never told me, but she did go behind my back and say, "Dad, this is the place where I work." And I do believe that he actually squashed that lawsuit. And I only found out after the man passed away. So I was very fortunate in that respect. But it meant I had to change all of the employment contracts. The first lot were, I had everybody as consultants, which makes sense over here. The second set of contracts were 2-year. They are now open-ended with the ability to list out exactly what would cause you to be terminated, and gives me and the company the space to get rid of people whose skill sets don't match the stage and development of where your startup is. This is a really crucial thing to understand. Does that help answer the question?
Absolutely. You can't get more precise and specific than that. So thanks very much. The last question before we move on to the next segment is really for you to help us understand the lay of the land, or maybe the options that we have starting out from a funding and financing standpoint, right? So I'm here, I have my big idea. I think or don't, whatever, I need money. What are my options? And then within those options, where do the community savings / Susu, Jangis, Chama, whatever we call it, come into play? It'll be great if you can educate us on those options.
I'm going to answer it from 2 specific areas. I'm going to start from the fact that the timing of our first business plan is better timed for today. When we went to Cameroon, we thought that we could gather all of the Njangis and tell them, form yourselves into a fund, and the surplus capital that you divide between you, let us invest that for you. They said no, for a very good reason. That's because in the absence of credit bureaus, Njangis, Susu, partner money, box, SACCOs have a social element by which people judge and decide whether or not you are creditworthy. So your ability to show up with your money every month, your ability to use your money investably, and let me give you a side note. I know of a female Njangi group in Douala. It's a pretty high ticket. It's about 5,000 a month. There are 12 women in it. So that means every year you are the one that will have the pot. When the women go to that woman's house and sit down, if you still have the same things you had 1 year ago and your business and your life has not improved, you will be kicked out of that group because it is considered that your lack of growth will cause you to be unsteady as it relates to decision making, taking care of your family, and being successful. And they understand that success breeds success. This is the African way of thinking, and it's highly applicable. So back then, there was no way anybody was going to put their money with us. They didn't know us. Today, there are young individuals creating innovative platforms that digitize these types of informal savings groups. Now, when we raised money for Ovamba, we did what is called a typical friends and family round. We went to all of our friends, all of our family. The first person to invest was my sister-in-law. She gave me $500 because while I was in New York trying to speak to people and pitch my business, I was expecting to be picked up by somebody, and that pickup didn't occur. And I didn't have any money to catch Amtrak back to Maryland. So she gave me the 500 and said, call it an investment. I opened my laptop and I filled her name out into the subscription agreement. You must have documentation. And I put her name, the first name, into the cap table that I started to keep. I said how much money people gave me, when I received it, and when I put it in the bank, because I was raising capital on what is called a convertible note. That convertible note says, this money you're giving me is a loan. At the end of a specified period of time, it can be anything you think it should be, and for us it was 2 years. If the company has not reached a point of growth, I will pay this money back with interest. But if I raise capital and there is a convertible event, I will turn this into equity, and your money will now become a share in the company at a discounted rate. So she was the first person that gave me 500. I put that money in the bank. I bought a ticket and went home. I started sitting down and speaking to absolutely everybody. And I received amounts that were as little as 500. I raised another $500, $1,000 from somebody else, 2,500 from somebody else. The biggest one came from my biggest individual investor, and he gave me a total of about $250,000. When I had that money, I had $650,000. 18 people gave me a certain amount of money because I went to a nightclub and said, what do you do in the daytime with all of this space? They said, nothing. I said, let me have a private party here. You're right next door to a restaurant, which you also own. I'll buy all my food from your restaurant. I'll rent out the space. It looks luxurious. It looks wealthy. It looks good. Will you let me do that? He says, yeah. And it was for such a small amount of money. I spent $770 on food and a little bit of wine and hosted a
I just want to jump in real quick, make sure, I appreciate you diving into your story, but if you can talk about the options, right? So you mentioned your one option being, sorry?
That's where I'm getting to, is the options.
Perfect, thank you.
To raise this money, and the reason I'm telling you that I had 23 people in a nightclub in the daytime is because some of the individuals were very smart and very savvy. I did a convertible note. Some of them wanted to invest more, and they wanted to invest from their 401k, from their pension funds. So that told me that I had to go back to my lawyer and ask, how do you do this? And it turns out it's one of the most effective ways to raise capital is to ask people if they can invest from their 401k, from their pension funds, because it has a tax implication. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a tax advisor, so make sure you speak to somebody. So I was able to raise capital from pension funds. I was able to raise money from individuals who just had it in the bank on a convertible note. I was able to raise capital from an institutional investor after Bob put in $250,000 because I was able to attract more money that way. I've written a few lists of things that are other ways in which people have come to us to give us investment money. One of them, as I've just mentioned, is a loan. It's a convertible loan. Jangies. Today, people probably can. Back then, they didn't.
What is Jangies for those who don't know?
In Cameroon, they're in Jangies. In East Africa, there's SACCOs, saving and loans. These are private savings and loan groups where people trust each other to commit to put money in a pot and share the benefits of that. There are others who call it susu or partner money or meeting. We have them in just about every immigrant society, especially when they leave where they are and go to another country. We'll find each other and put money together. There's also the fact that we were raising money on a barter basis. So things like not having enough money to build a website, by getting somebody who can build websites, but we can do things like writing, we were able to exchange activities to get the pillars of the business built without actually exchanging money. And then, of course, all of these small convertible loans actually did convert to equity, which is ownership for a percentage of the company, because we went and raised capital from a large institutional investor who gave us about 1.3 million based on the strength of our story. And then, of course, there's really just short-term debt and bridging capital. So those are ways in which you can raise money for your business. Aris, where would you want me to go from there?
That's fantastic. That's great. You touch on everything, at least that I wanted you to touch on. I want to switch gears one more time and really jump into, because a few folks, I think 26% of folks mentioned that lack of capital is an issue that they have. So I want to do a quick challenge slash assessment, asking folks on here, and I have this poll up here, those questions, right? Because, and then you and I collectively, we can make an assessment. So the idea behind those questions is, are you ready to go and raise some funds, irrespective to the options? So the first question is, do you know exactly what, how much you need and what you're going to do with the money? I'm asking the participant here. Go ahead and answer the question. The second question is, what type of investor do you need? Do you need them to be involved in the business, decision making? Do you need them to just provide the money? Do you, like, what exactly connections? What exactly do you need, if you know? The third one being, are you willing to give up control, right? Because somebody, you know, if they take control, they're probably going to tell you what to do or stuff like that, which is the fourth question is, are you willing to be educated, not educated, but told what to do? And the last one is around value proposition. What I mean by that is, are you clear what value you have, what's your competitive advantage for your product, your service, that, or your idea at least, that you have in mind? Viola, so my question to you is, on the first one, we do have 58% of folks who are saying they don't know exactly what they're going to do with the money. So we're just going to go sequentially and get your sense in terms of, what does it tell you? What does it tell you, essentially, somebody who needs money, but they don't know what they're going to do with it? In terms, as an investor, if you were to wear that hat for a second.
If you don't know what you're going to do with the money and you've raised it from other people, you are about to get yourself into an awful lot of trouble. And on top of that, you're going to fail. If you have a well thought through business idea, then you must have a line of sight on how that money is going to be made, and at least a projected idea of how you're going to pay it back or how you're going to make money. You need to have a revenue model. If you don't have that, then you don't know how much money is going to be spent, and you're going to be in a lot of problems. That's the first thing.
Thank you. Second question, I want to get your thoughts around those who are saying 47, which is the minority, 47 of folks are saying they are not sure what type of investor they're looking for. Somebody who have bring in relationships, as in connections, as we like to call it, folks who only going to bring in money, or they don't know, they're not quite sure. 47, which is kind of half of our participants here. What are your thoughts? What would you say to them?
About who the ideal investor is?
Yes.
You have the choices of those who are VCs. Angel investors are a really growing phenomenon on the African continent right now, or they're in other countries looking for African businesses to invest in. It all depends on the stage that you are at. So you can start with your own money. That's always a good investor. People want to see that you've put your own money and you have skin in your own game. An angel investor is the type of investor who is fully aware that you are probably going to fail. They want to be supportive. They have an investment thesis that is really, it could be social impact. It could be an ESG, which is also another form of social impact. And they do much smaller tickets. They might do something that is as small as $10,000 up to just 100 or 200,000. There are lots of them. A big warning to everybody. Not all angel investors are created equal. Some of them bring attachments to that money that you might not want. So make sure you read and understand what's being offered. Then there is incubator money, where that comes from being in an incubator where they help you to finesse your ideas till it's really, really good. And then that's what they're giving you in exchange for money. And then they take a percentage of your business. Actually, Ovamba did do that with the Founders Institute, which is one of the most intense incubators in the world. You next have venture capital. They've seen that maybe you have an MVP, which is a minimal viable product, and they're willing to take a chance. And what they're taking their chance on is the management team members and the team, the founders, and their ability to at least get the company to a point where the business is viable. They also, if they're very smart, know that this might not be what the business is going to be, but we trust that you have the intelligence and the expertise to find the right people to help you and to figure out how to get from one point to the next. They're also expecting you to have a good, strong, open relationship with them to manage their expectations. After VC, then you start getting into Series A, B, C, and beyond. And this is where you've got the hardcore equity investors who are looking to find out what your exit strategy is and are banking on the valuation of your company as you move forward. You need to figure out which of those are the most important for you. I personally have reached a point where I cannot stand VCs. I don't like talking to them anymore. We've gone beyond that point, but they tend to want to lowball you and give you an African haircut, which says that, look, I really like what you're doing, but because you are an African or your business is African focused, there's risk involved. Therefore, I need double-digit returns. And that might not be appropriate, and that might not be the best investor for you. In fact, this is very common in devaluing the projected value of African ideals innovations, and just assuming that in order for us to not lose our money, we need to discount you and take a much larger chunk of the business, and then set these goals and these timelines that if you don't reach it, then we just kick you out as the management company and keep the IP or keep the technology. You must figure out what the circumstances are of that capital for you to decide who the ideal investor is for you.
Thank you. And then we're just quickly going to go through the next two. Yeah, so the next one was willingness to give up control, to go big. That's fine. Well, that's okay. The next one is all of respondents are happy to, well, not all, actually, 83% are happy to being told or suggested what to do.
4 is quite surprising.
Yeah. And the last piece is 58% of folks are clear on what the value proposition is. They've done the research. 36 haven't done it, and 6 are not clear. Okay. Any last comment before we move on to the next segment, or nope? Pretty good.
I am disturbed by number 4.
Go ahead and comment on it.
I'd like to share an experience, if I may.
Absolutely.
When you're innovating your business and you're literally building the stairs you're walking on as you go along, you are constantly in a state of not being sure about things, and balancing that with managing the expectations of shareholders, investors, your staff, and even yourself, your spouse, your relatives. So it can occasionally make you doubt that you know what you're doing. But here's the thing. If you are the innovator of an idea that you believe is right, and you've got some strong indications along the way, you must be very careful about other people coming along and telling you, no, that's not going to work. That's not how this works. Because on the one hand, they want you to be disruptive and to have a value proposition that shows that you're differentiated. But on the other hand, they want to feel safe that your idea, your innovation, or your business model looks like others that have also succeeded. So individuals will get so panicked or have such a strong sense of control that they will come to tell you what to do because they've got their money with you. I would suggest that you fight that very, very hard. We had a situation where we were paying $7,000 a month to a very well-known high-end UK communications company, who I have to admit did a lot for us. But 4 years ago, When we were using the word trade tech, we were told there's no such thing and you must give this up. And they rewrote all of our briefs and all of our communications to eliminate this. At the same time, some of our American investors did not like the idea of us using the word Islamic finance so casually. We fought back on the use of the word Islamic, but we bowed down to not using the word trade tech. What do we have today in the last 2 years? Trade tech. This is what happens often. You must be willing to commit to your ideas, which means that you're willing to take the blame. You're willing to shoulder the responsibility of getting it wrong, but you're also willing to be the winner at the end of it because you stuck by your guns. Stick to your guns. It's okay for people to make suggestions, but you are ultimately responsible at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. So I hope this was valuable for you guys. The next segment is going to be essentially group work. We're going to do what essentially a real life scenario. You guys going to get into groups, discuss amongst each other, try and come up with your best solution to that question. I'm going to pop it on the chat over here. So this is the scenario. You guys, as I mentioned, will go in and form groups and really try and solution it. And then when we come back, Viola will going to inform us or educate us and essentially assess our answers. So the context is the following. You have a great, amazing business idea for Africa. Again, it could be here, it could be back home, or not on the continent. You think it will work, but you're not quite sure. There is some financial cost in validating the idea, and then you don't have the money. Assuming, to you, $1 million may be nothing, to the next person, maybe a lot of money, whatever. Let's just keep it subjective. It's quite a large amount of money. The question is, how would you go about funding it? You have 5 options. Reach out to friend and family. Viola mentioned some Susus and Jangis and Shamas, which is essentially family saving, community saving. Use your own personal saving, option 2. Number 3, go to the bank essentially or credit card. The 4th option is to look for a partner who owns 50%, and the last piece would essentially drop that idea and then go to another opportunity where that fits your budgets essentially, or basically pivot however you want to look at it. Am I making sense? Is that case making sense before I send you guys into groups? And then you guys going to land into groups. You may not know who they are. My suggestion is that take maybe 5 seconds to introduce yourself, who you are, maybe what you do, and try and solution this. And then what else? This is where having a camera on would help, but I understand some don't have it. That's totally fine. But let me just turn it on now. Any question? Is that clear? Is that making sense?
It's clear. If you could repeat it just once more, or just I've got the options, but the first...
you have it in the chat box, but let me repeat it one more time. You have an amazing idea. Essentially, you need money to validate it. You don't have the money to validate it. How would you go about funding your validation phase, essentially? Let me see if my question is cut out.
Do we have to stick to the options that are in the chat, or can we come up with our own possible options?
Yeah, sure. You can come up with your own. I'm just going to send you guys into groups now for about 8 minutes. It'd be a good opportunity to, leverage each other's experience and each other's expertise. So let me go ahead and send you guys into groups. Let's do about 45 folks per group, and then we'll get together right after that. 5 seconds. Let's do 7 minutes. Okay. All right, I'll take it. We're back. You only have 11 minutes. just going to speed it up. So unfortunately, I'm only going to grab 2. Let's go with Nyontui. We have Bontui, sorry. Bontui is on here.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, Bunchi. Yeah.
What's your next step?
Great to make your acquaintance. I would in our group we discussed the 4, and we said that 3 and 4 would be the.
What's your one next step? Now, what are your next?
Okay. Let's say we are gonna say 3. I think it's what we kind of had a consensus that 3 would be the ideal way, and then to also keep in mind that in this digital era.
Okay, we got 3. Thank you. Sorry, I had to cut you off.
Okay.
Daniel, can you go on, please?
We decided that it would be, most of us wanted to go and actually be on the continent, validate the process there. And
so is that your answer? Okay. And maybe Siwi, I think I have Siwi here. I hope I got that right. Or Anui, sorry.
Sylvie?
Yes, I guess.
Yeah, our group, we say market search first, then you have to align your goals with family and because you are preparing for a legacy. That's okay. What we talk about.
Thank you. Viola, what are your thoughts, given this context, what are your thoughts in terms of the very next step? If you can unmute yourself, please, or let me unmute you here, and then you could go on.
I'm so sorry. One of my colleagues there made a very good point. Because this is a digital era, being on the ground can sometimes be supported by looking at things, collecting information, partnering with individuals, Zoom, and all the rest of it. I know that for agribusiness, being able to use Google GPS to take a look at the ground, what you want to look at is actually a great way of supplementing from being on the ground. So don't forget, you've got digital tools that can support that. And the good point that we also brought up that is very important, it was almost like a red herring, about aligning with family. Sometimes you have to, because if you're married and your spouse is the only income earner while you're trying to get the business off the ground, you do have to get their consensus. Or if you're a parent and it's your child who lives in your house that's trying to turn half the space into a business, you got to have that conversation.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to the last segment of this, which is the Q&A. We extended these sessions by half an hour, but I know Sir is going to be mad at me for this, but I don't know why I can't keep it up. The discussion is so exciting. You guys are so great. And I feel there's so much value being shared with and amongst us. So I hope you guys appreciate the exercise, or at least what we're working on here. Enough of me. Question. Let me go through your great question for Viola here. So what do I see here? Boom, boom, make sure. Viola, I have one question here. Would you register your company in Africa, assuming that's where your business is, versus wherever you are in the world? So let's just say you're in Maryland, you're in the States, or Germany, UK. What are the pros and cons, if you could touch on that, please?
Depends where you live and the type of business that you have. And let me give you some context. Ovamba is registered in the state of Delaware because of the tax advantages, and that's the standard place that many people will use, Delaware and Nevada. Ovamba Cameroon Solutions is registered in Cameroon. It belongs to the topco, which is Ovamba Solutions, Inc. Then there's the opportunity. There are some jurisdictions that allow you, at least now, where you can have an address and the company is hosted in another country from where you are, because it is the preferable jurisdiction. So it all depends on what you're doing. And it all depends on where you're deriving your revenue and what your tax implications and obligations are. Again, get some advice from a lawyer or a tax advisor. But for every company I open in Africa, I have an African local company, and then I still have the top company.
Thank you. Daniel, you had a question earlier. My apologies, I interrupted you a couple of times.
She just did real good. She answered exactly my question. To open here, then go there and operate. Thank you.
Perfect. Who has got a question? I can't really decipher through the in the chat. There were lots of questions when you guys registered. Who wants to go here? Manny?
I have a question.
Sorry, hold on. Who is that?
Alex.
Introduce yourself, where you are, as well as what kind of business you have in mind, and go ahead with your question, please, Alex.
Definitely. My name's Alex. I live in Montreal, Canada. Currently, I don't really have an idea of a business. I'm just sort of looking at maybe planning something in the future. But my question was more on living in the diaspora, building a life here, and trying to open a business in Africa. What are the risks of doing it without necessarily being on the ground? Because I think sometimes we have this idea of, it's a beautiful idea to go, but we also have a mortgage, we have a job, we have a family, but we still want to do it. How can we do it without necessarily in the short term having to go on the ground, which eventually in the long term might be an option, but how to do it in the short term without having to go on the ground and build something that is viable, and not just something. Yes, thank you.
Which country are you thinking about starting in, Alex? You said where are you from?
My family background is from Congo and Rwanda. So currently I do have family in Rwanda, which is where my parents reside. So I would be looking at there.
So you're really thinking about where's the jumping off point from your day job? Is that the question?
It's not only the jumping off point from the day job, but it's also what are the risks and what would be the jumping off point for the day job, but how do I build something sustainable being away from the ground and not being on the ground? Is that even a possibility?
Well, as I've said, it's very difficult to eat with Africa with a long teaspoon. At some point, you must be there. Otherwise, you cannot manage the outcomes. You have to consider how much of a culture you're building. People need to see your presence. Unless you've got the kind of business that can be managed remotely, and I don't know which of those models there are out there, you guys would probably know better than me, but you know that you're ready for the jumping off point when you've got your bases covered. In my case, my situation was that I actually was holding down 2 part-time jobs after I left building the fund and after I finished doing my own consulting. One of those part-time jobs cheesed me off. So I went to the other guy and said, can I have full-time hours? And both companies knew I was building my own company. So I made sure that expectation was right up front. In between that time, and this may be easier for women to do than men, I was actually able to get temporary jobs where I could decide when I wanted to work, when I didn't want to work. The world is not that easy anymore, but that facilitated my ability to just ease into what I was doing. After I raised the friends and family capital, and this goes back to Aris's question about, do you know what to do with the money? You're raising that friends and family capital to make sure that you can afford to run the business. It's always a point of principle to pay yourself first in business. If you don't, and your brain is in poverty mindset, you cannot operate. So that's an important point.
Thank you. Just my 2 cents on this for you, Alex. It is possible, depending on the business you want. From my perspective, I started a farm in agriculture, so it's a whole discussion to how to manage it from abroad. But it's possible. To me, it really comes back to how bad do you want it and what are you willing to sacrifice. Let's move on to, we have Siwi. Sorry, I hope I pronounced that right. Emma and Manny, and then we have 2 minutes. So let's try and squeeze in those 3. Siwi, go ahead with your question, please.
Okay. Is that okay? Shay is my name. It's okay, from Nigeria, and just wanted to say thank you, Viola, for believing in Africa. So yeah, I realized that you're not in Nigeria, which we somehow pride ourselves to be like the giant of African commerce. So I'm just going to humbly ask that: are you willing to? Yeah, are you willing to come to Nigeria to partner? We are here for you. What will it take for us to partner with you here in Nigeria? It's just a question.
I'm not sorry, Viola. I'm just going to say, let's take it offline. He's going to have your information and you guys could take it offline. I want a question that benefits to most of us here. If that's okay with you, Viola?
Okay, that's fine.
The question is yes. Let's put later.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Emma, I understand you had a question.
Yes. Emma, based in Sierra Leone, past 6 years now, and I just exited a corporate job, and I'm going into the entrepreneurship, avenue. And my question is, I'm trying to do an angel investment network in Sierra Leone, and I've heard of some networks being or investment firm being sector specific. Do you agree? Because I look at it as, sector agnostic is better because there's so many like agriculture, tourism, and other, top sectors to focus on. So I'm just a bit confused on that, if I should pick one or just have a variety that has potential to grow.
This question will help you figure that out. To be successful as an angel investor, you need to have deep knowledge and expertise in what you're putting your money into. Do you know everything about all of those sectors? Would you be comfortable with the decisions that you make? Would you know what mistakes were being made?
Okay, I think that's a good guidance. So it's okay. So is that a rule of thumb to stick in one sector?
Warren Buffett is successful because he invests in things he knows and understands.
Okay.
If you know everything about all those areas, then great.
Okay.
Great, thanks. And the last but not least, sorry I have to, we almost out of time. I want to be respectful of your time. Manny, I hope I got that right.
Yeah. Thanks for taking my question. So I travel frequently between Toronto, Canada, and Kenya, and so just to jump off of the previous question someone had asked you about taxation, like what would you say about like if I was doing an import-export business of foodstuffs, like what would you say about the issue of taxation? Because I might end up having to pay tax in both countries. So what would you say about that?
The first thing I would tell you, tax treaties are in place between where you are, where you're sourcing the goods, and where you're sending them to. Also find out whether the government of the country where you are operating from has any tax abatements or incentives for businesses that are in those sectors. And you should definitely get tax and legal advice. So the other thing I would say about that is you may be tempted to go to the Ernst & Youngs, the Deloittes, the KPMGs of this world. If you do that, compare that with local consultancy who may or may not know that information a little better.
Thank you very much. And this was the last question for today. I'm looking for Serge. Is Serge around or he had left? Okay. Great. Serge is my partner on this. Unmute yourself. And I usually like to, we usually have it as a transition for Serge to close, provide the closing notes for us. So you go ahead and close it, my man. And we're going to have Viola give us some last word of wisdom before we all go our separate ways.
All right. I have like tons of questions for you, Viola, but hopefully we'll have an opportunity to invite you back in a couple of weeks, months, so we could really dive in further on this wonderful conversation. To everybody who joined the conversation today, lots of thank you. We really appreciate you joining us this afternoon or morning, wherever you are, and sharing your ideas and thoughts, and most importantly, sharing your passion and your understanding of the value that we in the diaspora could really provide to Africa. If you are here for the first time, we are super glad that you joined us today. We hope that we will have future opportunities to reconnect with you. I think Iris is going to be sending a survey after this workshop. Please do consider taking the survey and sharing with us your thoughts about what you like, what you didn't like, and what you can do better.
Sorry, don't consider, please do it. Go ahead, Serge.
And this is our 5th session. So we started way back in May. Different topics, different business opportunities, weeks after week. And that is how we plan to do this going forward. We are looking for all of you guys to embark on this journey with us, right? We believe sincerely that the diaspora has a crucial role to play in the development of the continent. And we believe that those who participate would only reap social benefits from it, but also significant financial rewards as well. And we would like you to not only join us, but to also share, because the more we have, the more people we have involved in these different activities and these different endeavors, the more we build a community that supports each other, and the farther we'll go individually as we work on our own entrepreneurial dreams, and also collectively as diaspora, we work towards impacting the continent. So please, I know each and everyone is part of a WhatsApp group of a very Nukit community. Please share this information with your community so we could empower more people and really grow the network. With that, a whole lot of thank you. Viola, thank you so much. We really want to hear from you again. I'm not gonna put you on the spot in terms of you committed to come back, but Aris and I will take that conversation offline, and hopefully we'll be able to convince you. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Viola, some last word of wisdom from you. I mean, hopefully this was enjoyable for you. You have so much knowledge. It was difficult for me to pack that into 90 minutes because there's so many different directions I wanted to go, but I hope this was valuable to you, and more importantly to every single one of us. So I'll leave that with you to let us go with some words of wisdom, because you have made the jump that most, if not all of us, are trying to make. So a couple of words maybe, and we'll close it.
Well, first of all, Aris and your team, thank you for giving me an opportunity to make friends with people today. There are some people here who I've known from before. I even have one of my employees from my team is on here. Thank you for always making Ovamba such a great place to work. Severin, I see you there. Severin Coffee, so thank you. If people who have done well don't share the benefit of their knowledge, our continent is doomed to be not a very good place to raise our families. So it's so important to respect the opportunity to chat with people and to share honestly and sincerely what works, what doesn't work, so that you guys can go on to do much better than I could ever hope to do. And with that, I wish all of you the very best of luck. Would love to stay in touch offline if Aris permits that. And I always tell people that this ain't your granddaddy's Africa. That's because Africa has changed. It's yours. You're the ones that are going to carry the hopes and the dreams of all of our entrepreneurial output. And I look forward to seeing all of you fail, get up, and succeed. But I want to see you survive the tough times. It's not all going to be easy, but you're more than ready for the job. So thank you.
Thank you. And my closing notes here, just one quick sentence, is that we want to make it as practical as possible. We don't want this to be a webinar, as I mentioned multiple times. We want it to be so that at the end of it, you know exactly what to do. If you had any obstacle, any question, any problem, hopefully this answered it. Every week, we have a specific topic, a specific industry, so that, you know, if you're trying to get into fashion, if you're trying to get into, you know, agriculture, by the end of that workshop, not webinar, workshop, you know what your very next step should be. Okay? With that being said, have a good weekend, everybody.